my mum phoned me one day. She was walking down the road and she said, something's different and I don't know what it is, but I think I'm understanding. And she said, I walked past a person and they made eye contact. And normally she would just look directly at the floor.
Mm.
And she said that I walked past this person and I made eye contact. And it's the first time in my life that I've walked down the street and not felt ashamed of myself.
Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. Let's take this time to learn together. Welcome. Today I'm joined by Ed Lofts. His story is as inspiring as it is intense. With 7 world kickboxing titles and over 2 decades in martial arts, Ed has dedicated his life to helping others break through their barriers, both in sport and in life. His work spans from coaching children to training elite athletes, all with a focus on mental resilience and self-awareness. Having also gone through Tim's Lift program, Ed brings a unique perspective on trauma recovery and personal growth. Welcome, Ed. It's good to see you today, and I'm really looking forward to dive into your journey with you.
It's nice to see you again, Andy.
I thought that we could start off with a couple of lighthearted questions, and so my first question for you, Ed, is there what's something that's brought you joy in the past days or weeks?
So I spoke about this with somebody else the other day. There was a moment a couple of days ago where somebody who's very dear to me, they asked me if I'd practiced gratitude.
Mm,
And I kind of said, not in the way that everybody else that is professing it on Facebook and Instagram and all these different posts about being grateful all the time, like practicing gratitude. It should be something that when something comes along that you should be grateful for, it's not something that you would practice. It's an experience that you have to be
mm-hmm.
grateful. Like jumping in a swimming pool, you get wet whilst you're swimming, and that it's an experience. And then when you get out, you slowly dry off, and the gratitude disappears. And it was a moment. I was actually riding a motorcycle at quite high speed down a very nice English country lane, and the sun was shining behind me, and it was shining directly through a blossom tree, and then there was a gust of wind that blew this very pretty pink blossom off the tree, and everything just went into slow motion, and the blossom flew across the road, the carve on the motorcycle, everything just connected all at one point, and there was contentment, there was joy, there was relaxation, and it all culminated in a single moment that felt like it was an entire lifetime.
Mm.
And that it was a really poignant moment, and it made me say, like, that's what gratitude is. It is the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, no, I like that. As you're describing that, I can go through that experience. Like I'm feeling that sense. I'm going along with you. And so, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And a little bit, a lot of times it's like we put in the reps on gratitude where we're sitting down in a room and maybe just saying it and trying to feel it. But what you're saying, like being in an experience that you're in and just really kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, like recording that memory, recording that instant, being with, not recording, but like just really being with that instant in
Yeah.
gratitude. Yeah, yeah. So this question I have, I'm really excited to hear your answer for it. If you could have any fictional or historical character as your sparring partner for a day, who would you choose and why?
Are we talking physical sparring or intellectual sparring or
Oh, I was thinking physical, but
physical
if
sparring?
I'll let you, since I didn't delineate that, I'll let you answer the question however you prefer.
I would have to say Charlie Chaplin.
Hmm.
Yeah, but just so I think so. First of all, we need to define sparring because I have this big thing where beating the crap out of each other isn't sparring. So
Hmm.
sparring is the motions or movements of combat, depending what type of combat, whether it be fencing, boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu. So it would be the motions or movements of combat without so without heavy blows.
Hmm.
So the motion of the thing you're doing minus the heavy blows. Therefore, it should be like a conversation. It should go back. It's like I talk about it like playing catch with a kid. You you,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't throw the ball full power at a child unless you've got some serious issues. But people do that in sparring quite often, and they come. It means that they're not really sparring. They're either bullying someone, or they're being bullied, or they're in a
Mm-hmm.
fight and they don't even know. So sparring should be play, and it should be akin to playing catch or a conversation. And yeah, so I would like that with Charlie Chaplin. The other person that just popped into my head was Frank Sinatra, maybe.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Why Charlie Chaplin and Frank Sinatra?
So Charlie Chaplin, particularly because of how he could convey information and what I would class as attention. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all the data without words. And sparring is a conversation without words. So I'm pretty sure that from that interaction with possibly Charlie Chaplin, I would learn something valuable. Yeah, maybe about how to fake people better,
Mm.
or position yourself, or posture in a way that can give off a signal. Yeah, he was a master of his ability to convey a message without words, and I think that's big. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And kind of what you said earlier about play as well. When I think of Charlie Chaplin, like he's conveying that, but I always get this sense of him just playing and
yeah,
really exploring and enjoying his environment. And so I think it
yeah,
really fits with how you're defining sparring.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that was actually really unexpected for me to hear. I'm glad. I'm really glad that you went in that direction.
Yeah.
Uh, have you had like what's a strange or unexpected advice, like bit of advice that you've ever received in your journey?
I've talked about this one before. I say because I always have to think about how to phrase it. I once had it pointed out to me by a very close coach of mine that I had dropped my ethics on the floor.
Mm,
Like, as it imagine like if you dropped your wallet and somebody said, "Oh, you've dropped your wallet."
hmm.
They just turned around to me and said, "He gave you a lesson in ethics." And then I was looking on the floor for my ethics. I was like, "What?
Mm,
I've dropped them. Where have they gone?" And I apologized immediately because I realized that I didn't understand what they meant. I knew they were correct. In the very instant there was the trigger of uh, so the person in question is called Ido Portal, and he's an absolute amazing human being. It was what he would call limbic friction, which is being triggered. So this urge came up with inside me, an emotional charge that wanted to make me try to defend why I hadn't dropped my ethics, but I knew
mm-hmm.
I had. So there was no argument to be had. It was I was learning a lesson, and I needed to accept the lesson. And if I fought against it by justifying it and reasoning with it, then I wouldn't have learned a lesson. So I apologized immediately. I went away for the rest of like we were still interacting throughout the day, but then I thought I was going through all these different things. Like, is he mad at me? Has he done it? And he wasn't mad at me. He wasn't annoyed with me. He was just giving me a very valuable lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned it to him several times since, that it was a really valuable lesson, because I thought I knew about morals and ethics and I thought I used them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then that day I realized that just because you know about them isn't practicing them. And then
Isn't
it's all part of the practice. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, when you're talking about these moral and ethics, it sounds kind of like your internal boundaries, your internal morals.
Yeah.
And yeah, with that limbic friction, how did you resolve that? So it sounds like you outwardly kind of immediately understood and went in this direction, but like internally, like how did you resolve that limbic friction, the trigger that was going on inside of you?
So I used the analogy to think through it of how they make a samurai sword. They
Mm,
heat the metal and then they fold it 100 or 1,000 times, and the more folds, the sharper the sword can become. So what I allowed myself to do was to be heated up.
mm,
And what normally happens with most people is the limbic friction builds up and it causes anger, and they take it out, they snap at the other person, but in defense. Like today, I was riding a motorcycle and there was a road shut. The road I was on was fine to go down,
mhm,
and somebody was turning into the road I was on, and they were in the wrong. They literally could have killed me as they cut across the front. I had to skid the bike, and then they jumped to their own defense. And I had to like say to the person, "You're in the wrong. You're driving dangerously." But nothing was going in because they jumped to anger. They
mhm.
knew they were wrong. They were embarrassed. Their shame was triggered, and they started screaming and shouting. And I just had to say to them, "Look, I'm having a great day. I'm riding my motorbike. You're having a bad day, and
Mhm.
you're in the wrong. So go away and have the rest of your bad day whilst I enjoy my day." And this is it. It's taking that initial anger, this emotional response that is, it will heat you up. Like when people are angry, they physically get hotter. They start to
Mm,
sweat. You
mhm,
perspire. The anger is an emotion. It's filled with adrenaline sometimes, and the cortisol, I suppose. So that heat's got to go somewhere. And what's it for? Do we turn it into vicious words that can burn somebody else's inner peace away, or do we take it and we fold it into something new that can be wielded whenever we need it? And that's what I did. I sat and I I researched ethics. I wrote about them. I reread what I'd written about. I understood what I'd done wrong, so I reflected on the actual instance
mhm, mhm.
to not let that same thing happen again, because then you're learning from your mistake. And uh, and it helped me develop in a different direction that I wouldn't have gone in without that lesson.
Yeah. So it sounds like you put a lot of time and effort into developing that ethics, developing like a moral will, and learning how to stick with it, and then how to look at yourself when you have
Yeah.
lapses in it.
Like with this, there's people kind of go, "Oh, you work so hard on yourself, and you put yourself through all these different things, and you kind of go into things full on." And I'm like, well, that's why I'm happy.
Mm,
Like, that I'm not doing it for in an altruistic fashion.
hmm
Like, if you concentrate on working on yourself, you will develop skills that you're proud of. You'll develop a person that you're comfortable to be inside with, kind of thing, internally and externally. And it's not like people say, "Oh, love yourself." And it's like, okay, well, some of us aren't people that deserve to be loved in terms
hmm
of our actions and our behaviors. So everybody, we all started off the same way, but we like, when I do things to myself that are detrimental to me, then it's like chopping myself down. I'm bringing myself down a peg or two. And it could be the inner critic. It could be berating ourselves internally in a fashion that if somebody else overheard us doing it, they would say that it's abusive. If it was a partner or a friend, it would be classed as coercive control and abuse. But because we're doing it to ourselves, it's like, oh, he's just tough on himself, or she's tough on herself, kind of thing. So I think if you start to really go, okay, well, how do you make yourself happier? Especially if you're a parent, I suppose, with kids around and stuff. If you're happier, those kids will be happier themselves, because you're not going to give them a hard time, and they're going to see the modeling from their parent that they are living a happier life. So it's very selfish of me to be working on myself all the time, I think, in a positive way.
Hmm. You know, I really like this line, and so I want to detour by staying in it. So, because I think this is an area that a lot of people with complex trauma run into difficulty with,
Mm.
and just kind of that inner ethics, the inner moral. And so it's I don't want to eat that pint of ice cream, but I do. I don't want to have that beer, but I do. I don't want to sleep with that person, but I do. I want to run 3 miles, but I don't. And so, can you talk about, like, was there a time in your life when you struggled with these inner ethics, and like how do you get to that point where you can kind of recognize the benefits on the other end of it, such that you do stick with the ethics, and such that you do, like, follow through to get to the point where you've come to today?
Yeah. So your question, I think, is based in instant gratification
Hmm.
versus procrastination, and when to make yourself do the thing you don't want to be doing.
Hmm.
So what I always say is, if somebody is seeking instant gratification all the time, the donut, the ice cream, the promiscuity, the sleeping with people that you shouldn't sleep with, doing all these things, they're doing it because of how they feel. And if you knew somebody was frightened of a spider, and you take a spider to that person, you are abusive, because they have an internal fear. So their physical body is frightened of the spider, and you're forcing them to go near it. Whereas if somebody has the same reaction to their own emotion, so they don't like to feel the stress of paying all the bills and doing the paperwork at home, or even putting the bins out or tidying their bedroom, that when somebody forces them to do the thing that scares them the most, that's abusive. But then it's saying to them, okay, do they need to be abused in order to get it done, or is there an easier, nicer way of doing it?
Hmm.
And I think that's the underline of that question. It's like, okay, I made myself run a marathon with no formal marathon training. Like most people train for sort of 18 weeks or even longer building up to it. Unfortunately, I had the flu. I couldn't do the training for it at all. I was in bed, like completely incapacitated for a couple of weeks. I did one run of 20 miles and then ran the marathon. And it's like, I can make myself do that. But then for a year, I suffered for it. I depleted my energy systems. My legs didn't recover for a very long time. And then that is a form of self-sabotage, and it's a form of abuse to yourself. But our society, we celebrate people that can do that type of thing. Like it, if somebody, like that, the David Goggins of society, it's like he's running himself into the ground, his knees are shot to pieces. What happens if he stops? How does he actually feel when he doesn't do all of those crazy things all the time and he just sits still? Because that's when the emotions come up and the things that we're scared of. And then when to avoid those emotions, then we run towards the instant gratification of the donut or the relationship with people. And it's avoiding being in the present. And that's where I got to with it. It's kind of let's see, how do we really feel right now, if we're being honest with ourselves. which then leads you back to the other question about if you've worked on yourself, then being in the present is a nice place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like the clarity that you bring with that, kind of both that there's a lot that society expects that's abusive, but also that inner critic, the way we abuse ourselves, and that coercive control, as you said. Who, if the inner critic is all you know, where do you find that firm kind of guiding strength of this is a healthy thing I want to be doing, and moving towards that healthy thing rather than uh, utilizing the inner critic
I've,
if the so I think the question that I have with that is, when we have that inner critic, and you've talked about it being like abusive and coercive control, uh, how do we find or build a voice inside of us that may be a calmer, gentler, but still firm voice, or an unyielding voice to meet that ethics, that internal ethics, the morals, such that so that we do go and train for even a 5K, if not a marathon, that we go out and do the things that are healthy for us, that may have long-term benefits, but in this instant gratification world, it's so different, so difficult to do something for a long-term benefit, um, versus versus going for that indulgence.
so I would start with identification. So if we have an inner critic, first of all, when's it being vocal and what is it being vocal around
Mm-hmm.
or about? And then we would say, okay, well, let's use our skills of observation to actually observe, is it correct? And if it isn't correct, then why do we listen to it in the first place? That is basically that's the process I would go through. And
Mm-hmm.
if you started there, we would say, okay, well, every time I go to do something, like I'll give you an example. Every time we go to do something that I have a chance at failing, and there's a possibility I might fail, instead of failing, I mess around. So I don't take it seriously, even though it's something I want to achieve. I'm going to mess around instead of taking it seriously. And if I mess around and I fail, it's because I was messing around and I didn't really care. But what if we fully engage in something and say, okay, this means something to me, so I'm going to achieve, whether I fail or not, I'm going to put my all in and I'm going to achieve what I achieve. And then you make a mistake, and then suddenly you hear, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, why do I always fail, what's the point of even trying? And it just goes round and round in a circle in our heads. And then we say, okay, well, who told me, who was it that told me
Mm-hmm.
that failing is bad? Because like I personally have failed. I've failed physically on things, tasks before. I've dropped motorcycles and smashed them to pieces. I've crashed cars by accident. I've stubbed my toe by not paying attention. I've bitten my tongue. Like, all of these things are simple things where it's a failure physically. Like a reaction wasn't quick enough, and I was actually I was at kickboxing world championships once. My instructor's daughter was a toddler and she tripped over, and I dived to try to catch her before she tripped, but I missed. I didn't get there quick enough. She hit her head, and she's now got a scar, which she's like 20 years old now, but she's got a little scar. And I remember the day she got it, and I felt awful. I felt like I was a failure as a human being because I didn't save this kid from hitting their head. But all of these things are just bits of evidence. And if we examine them and we say, okay, well, why is it bad to fail? Like, human beings, we always say about nobody's perfect. I absolutely hate the saying when nobody's perfect. It's like, maybe we were designed to fail.
Mm.
Like, maybe we were designed to keep trying after we failed. And maybe as long as we're existing, we are perfect. perfection is not something that we're going to get in terms of our life is going to be ideal. But if we're in a situation and we can keep moving forwards and we build the resilience, like there is a design which allows us to keep moving forwards and understand ourselves better. And I think it all starts back with what we just said about, so identifying it, listening to it, articulate it to ourselves, learn to explain it to other people, talk about it. And if we can go through that process, we start to become familiar. So identification of the inner critic, become familiar with it. When's it talking to me? What's it saying? Has a person in my past said those same things to me and I've taken them on board, and now it's my voice, but they're living through me like a mouthpiece. And so identification, familiarity, and once we become familiar with it, we can catch it. And the more times we catch it, the more chances we've got of making a change to it. But I know it's a big, long explanation on that one.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think there's a piece of that that I really resonate with. I think you stated in a different way than I normally do, but coming to that place that life is about learning. Uh, when if life is about being perfect and being perfect the first time, we take away all opportunity to learn and to
Yeah.
actually grow and to change. And it makes it a lot harder to try new things. But if life is about failure and then getting up again and then failure and then getting up again, if that becomes a big part of the goal, then there's nothing to lose. If your goal is to fail over and over again, and you're essentially on that same path as having relearned how to learn again.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the explanation and the example you gave there.
Yeah. I think the one bit that I would add to it as well is, if we fail 10 times and then we succeed on the 11th, succeeding means more to us.
Mm,
Whereas if you go to do something, even if it's very difficult what you've
mm,
done, but you achieve it on the first try, it has less value, and the value comes in the meaning, the
mm,
lessons kind of
hmm
thing. So if we can do things many times and fail, but safely, like normally when we fail at reaching a goal, setting a goal, getting up and cleaning our teeth in the morning, anytime there's these type of failures, that's where the inner critic comes in. And where I personally think the inner critic should come in is the opposite side. So it's when I succeed, the inner critic should then defend us. It should say, like, okay, you've succeeded, now I'm gonna allow you some time to party, celebrate, find some joy, experience the gratitude that we talked about earlier.
hmm
But then it should then get us back online. Like, I know some people have massive celebrations about the tiniest little things, but then they get stuck there. And then it's like they're not that they're not pushing forwards anymore, because you don't have to push for, like, you can just be in a space by yourself, not doing anything, but it's about how you feel.
hmm
And I know some people sit still and feel awful, and that's my thing that I try to help people is to feel better just existing. And Tim's definitely done that, I think, as well for people. But yeah, the the more times we fail, when we finally succeed, then it really has some meaning, I think.
hmm I think there's there's a little bit that's coming out in what you're saying as well. And it's been helpful in my own journey, kind of shifting from an achievement model, a destination model to a journey model, and to embracing the action, embracing the effort, and being able to accept and find that joy in this moment. And it sounds like there's something coming out in what you're saying that really resonates with that. I was wondering if you could speak about that more, maybe shifting
Yeah,
from a
it's quite
destin.
yeah, it's quite poignant. Excuse me, the cat is going crazy. I'll I'll put him out in a second. Basically, it's playing as an explorer. So I see myself as an explorer on a treasure hunt. And I hate it when people say you need to live outside your comfort zone. Like you definitely don't want to live outside your comfort zone. Being outside your comfort zone is being in your sympathetic nervous system. It's like you're triggered, you're aware of everything, and you are in danger if you're not in your comfort zone. Obviously, once you investigate and you can identify and become familiar with those things outside your comfort zone can grow as well. So I'm not saying stay in your comfort zone, but like Indiana Jones films, as an example, he's an explorer that everybody knows. The film always starts off at the university or at his home in the office, and then he goes out in the world, saves some type of artifact or the world, and then at the end of the film, he brings the treasures that he's found back to a safe space. And this is something that we do on a daily basis. We go out in the world and then we come back in, and we do that. Even our attention does it, doesn't it? So we can be internally focused, listening to the inner critic, worrying about how we feel on the inside, and then suddenly our attention goes outside to an external target, being a person or a subject, and it goes between the two. But it's really about our thoughts and the story we're telling ourselves internally, and that is definitely affected by the external environment. And I think a lot of the time people forget, as an explorer, so we could explore the world, we can create maps, but who's got the maps for exploring internally? And have they even mapped the territory?
You know, with speaking about exploring, kind of what comes up for me, and in all sorts of exploring is, you know, like a 4 to 6 year old, and how a child is engaging with the world, where they're in the present, they're not thinking about the future. They may not be worried about the result of getting the perfect stack of bricks or whatever they're doing, but they're touching it, they're feeling it, they're stacking it up, knocking it over, stacking it up, knocking it over. But um, like that attitude seems one that I see a lot in 5 year olds, but
Yeah.
not as much. That there's some point in our life where we lose that exploration mindset and move to maybe this more goal oriented mindset.
Do you think that maybe the position where we lose it and we change to a goal orientated mindset is when we find out we couldn't be the astronaut or the firefighter, and I would investigate. I'm not saying this is what it is or what it isn't, but I would investigate. Okay, did we get pressed into a mold by our parents or by the people around us in our environment that the mold wasn't even big enough for us to even grow in? So we were already bigger than that. We were thinking astronaut, like climbing a tree just to get as high as possible in the tree. And the parent says, don't do that, it's not safe. You're like, but the parents worried that you're going to fall, and they push these limitations on us, not realizing that the child doesn't have the same limitations as the parent. And there's kids at school that don't have the same limitations as the teacher, but the teacher thinks that that child needs to learn English, whereas that child could be the best electrician in the world and cope with the minimal amount of English to get through the course. Like I've got friends that run very big businesses that have got no GCSE results from school and things like this. So there's that. If we were going to explore, but we got pushed into this tiny little mold that we were already too big for, then we're going to be all bent out of shape trying to fit in the mold. And that's where I think then it's like we've learned that we shouldn't even try to be the thing we wanted to, because we could fail. And we've learned that because we could fail, it might embarrass our parents, and there's no point doing that, because if they get embarrassed, the consequences will be dire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a full circle in what you're saying as well too, going back to talking about that inner critic, and the development of that inner critic is all of a sudden now we're focused on our limitations and we're being bent out of shape, and it, what you just described to me sounds as one of the places where that inner critic starts to develop and where we focus on those limitations. Yeah. I don't. I've enjoyed this this direction. I want to shift directions with you
Yeah,
here, just to get a little bit of maybe some of your history. And so I remember we spent 2 or 3 weeks together in the lift program,
yeah,
and your life stories always sounded. I felt like I was in a car chase while listening to you,
yeah.
and your stories
Makes
always
sense.
sound like they came out of an action movie. And so I was wondering if you could take us back to maybe one or two defining childhood moments that shaped who you are today.
Yeah. So whenever I talk to people about my life, I feel like they believe I'm lying about it. Like, because of all the different strange things that have happened to me and the people that I've bumped into along the way, like, it just doesn't sound real. And for me, that it shows me how surreal it feels to me.
Mm. Hmm.
So I quite often pull other people in when I'm telling a story. I pull someone else in to confirm that it is a real story. I'm not saying I don't exaggerate sometimes, but I think any good story needs a bit of emphasis on certain occasions. So a good one, just again from the complex trauma perspective, with a
Hmm.
story that was pretty bad. Um, and I didn't realize how much it had affected me till probably just a couple of years back. But so we were not very well off when we were kids, and when, like, our family, my dad had left, and so it was my mum, single mum, and there was my older brother, myself, and my younger sister all lived in the house with my mum. It's quite a big house, but we're with a bottom flat, like apartment, I think is the term that you guys would use. So it's the flat, the bottom level of a big house, and there's two other apartments above us. And it used to be a big house that was connected, and somebody renovated it into split it into sections. So we we had a electricity key. So instead of paying monthly, if you miss monthly payments in England, they give you a key that you would go and charge up. So you
Hmm.
take money to a shop where they can charge the key, and you basically give them money. So my mum said to me, "Can you go and get the electricity?" She gave me the key, and she gave me £6 coins. I've got on my BMX. I was probably eight 8 or 9 years old, and I've I've ridden from where we lived probably 2 miles into the town centre, but I went onto the seafront, and I went past the Hastings Pier, which is sticks out into the sea. There's some arcades there. There's like rides and things. And as I was riding past this, it connects to the other story. So there's people that say don't talk to strangers, but I had a push bike that got stolen, and as I was riding along the seafront, there was a man on the same push bike that I had. Obviously, I had the kids version, but this older man had the adults version of the bike. And as I drove past, I literally turned around to him and I said, "Nice bike." Not, it was just a fleeting thing, but it was because I got triggered. Like, that was my bike, and my brother borrowed it with his friends, and it got stolen, and it was like my best thing in the world at the time. So I'd got this crappy old BMX, and I was driving along, and the guy that I said nice bike to then started following me.
Hmm.
And I didn't think anything of it when I said it. I didn't really even say it to him. I just sort of said out loud, "Nice bike." But he started following me, and then he was propositioning me, saying "Oh, you can come to the house, and you can earn money and this type of thing." he was obviously a paedophile. There's no two ways about it. He followed me for about a mile into the town centre. And then when he saw that we didn't have much money and I was putting the key in the meter and paying the pound coins, he basically started to double down to say like, oh, I've got these odd jobs at my house. You can come and help and I'll pay you some money. And I was just like, my mum had prepped us for this because she was pretty good at this type of thing. I just told him to leave me alone, go away. But he persisted all the way back again, back to the same spot. And then luckily there was a gentleman there from what we would call like sea cadets, which is like it's like army training, but for the Navy kind of thing. We just did it now and again as kids. And luckily that there was an adult there just stood near that I knew. So I sort of said to him, can you get rid of this guy? He's following me. And he went and had a word with him and the guy cleared off. But then once the guy had left, I just remember being, I had to ride about another mile back home. And I remember being absolutely petrified because I was like looking over my shoulder. Is he still following me? Is he still following me? And I got home. I was completely safe, got home, and I told my mum. And the police came around the house. My mum phoned the police. Police came around the house and they had like this big folder. And they said, okay, is the guy in the book? And I found him in the book. I said, that's the man there. And the police said, like, at any one time, there's up to, this was like 1990 or something, I think. And the police said at any one time, there was like up to 10 or 15 paedophiles all waiting on the pier for somebody to get lost from their parents and this type of thing. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's what the policeman said at the time. And then a few months after that, we saw the same guy quite often. He was like round the area. He used to park his bike up and I recognized the bike. And my mum confronted him one day and started shouting at him and calling the police. But what that then did later on was, so I didn't connect the two, but say if I was driving in my car and somebody gets too close and they're tailgating, I would get this furious anger. I would be like, that somebody's right on my shoulder. And it then occurred to me one day that the reason I get so annoyed is because this guy was on my shoulder and he was following me for miles and miles and miles. And it's disgusting. Like, where was anybody to help properly? Like, God knows what could have happened if I hadn't have been prepped by my mum to sort of do the right thing at the right time and stuff. But then also it's my parents' fault because an 8-year-old child shouldn't be having those responsibilities. So it's my dad's fault. It's my mum's fault that I was in that situation in the first place. And it's had repercussions. Now I still get like if I hadn't identified it and somebody had tailgated me so close in my car that one day I got out and had road rage at them and things, if you don't have the awareness of where that feeling comes from. And so what was happening is anytime somebody was following me in a car or behind me, possibly, I was getting an emotional flashback of the exact same emotions that I had that day. And I hadn't connected the two. So I was having a feeling emotionally of fear and anger and sort of hatred and disgust for this type of behavior. And it was being projected onto anybody that was coming up behind me, kind of thing. And it literally could have ended up with me jumping out of my car and caving someone else's car in or blowing up if I hadn't connected the two. So that's a very, very big traumatic event that happened to me as a kid that could blow over to be an adult, kind of thing. The other one that fits with it. So I said about the bike that I had that got stolen. So that bike, a kid, I don't know, as a kid, if you ever had a bike, and it's kind of like, it's your mode of transport, it's your freedom technically around the neighborhood and everything.
And a lot of joy you get out of it. Yeah,
we love our bikes. And at the time, I'd had about 3 or 4 bikes stolen. So it didn't matter what I did, whether the bike was safe in the garden, someone came in the garden and stole it, whether my brother's friend borrowed my bike, they locked it up at the swimming pool and it got stolen. Then another day, my mum says, "Can you go to the shop and get some milk?" I've gone to the shop, put my bike outside the shop where everybody puts their bikes, and I'm a kid. I walk back out the shop, and someone's riding off on my bike, and I'm screaming, "Stop that guy!" And the greengrocer at the time is a really nice man. He owned a local grocery store, and he sort of stood. He's a huge, looked like a farmer. He's a really big guy, and that he just let the person ride past on my bike, and all these adults were petrified of stopping these people and putting their
Mm,
foot down with paedophiles and thieves. It's like that they're things that are not nice, and they are in our environment. So
mhm,
we need people to educate and protect on this. And where were they when I was growing up? Because I didn't see any. So then, what then happens now? Anytime I lose something, like if I put something down and I come back to it and it's not there, I get a feeling, an emotional flashback that it's been stolen. And there is like a moment where I have to tell myself, hold on, nobody's broken into your house and moved your keys. You've put them somewhere. And this is where the inner critic bit can kick in quite a bit, because if you catch yourself and you go, okay, I know where this emotional feeling of
mm,
it's been stolen, it comes from the amount of things I had that got taken off me as a kid that were stolen. So then it means that in the environment, things can be stolen. So you do have to look after things. But when it's happening with your cup of tea that you've just put down, and then you've moved it on the other side, and you look one side and it's over there, but you still get this emotional feeling if it's been stolen, then there's definitely work to be done. And those two things have affected me massively as an adult. But because now I understand them, so I can identify them and I'm familiar with them, it's actually now funny.
mm.
It's come to the point where if I put something down and I think, hold on, it's been stolen, I go to myself, haha, someone's stolen it. Because I know that they haven't, and
Mhm.
then I can go and find it wherever I've left it, kind of thing. But
Yeah,
yeah, they're two big stories for me.
yeah. So you've done a lot of work that's rewritten, kind of not just that. I was going to say that the script, but it's like, we have that trauma stored in our body, so it just kind of will
Yeah.
burst out again. So it sounds like that you grew up in a pretty unsafe and a scary area. If there's a lot of theft and pedophiles and just kind of like dangerous people around.
Yeah. It's really interesting though, because the area I grew up, it wasn't very affluent. Hastings, England, East Sussex. It's not a very nice place in terms of opportunities and things like this, but there are some really nice people, but they're mixed in with people who have been traumatized, who've had horrible things to happen to them. And I thought it was okay, is it just Hastings where this has happened? But I've been to places that are rich and the same things are happening. And it's the difference is in Hastings, the bad people will tell you they're bad people. The good people will kind of just look after you a bit, and there's everything in between. But it's a very small, concentrated place. So, like growing up, I saw two policemen have to fight somebody with a knife. I've seen like car accidents, like seen people get hit by cars. Just general fights. There was, I can't remember what the kids have got a term for it now, where they basically set up getting somebody to go to a location and then
Mm,
they fight them as a gang, where it's like five
mhm.
on one, that type of thing was happening. There was robberies, like yeah, all sorts of stuff. So it's not, but I think it's everywhere now. I don't think anywhere's any different. I just think I was
Mhm.
very aware of it at the time.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you've become very aware of some of the different traumas and able to place it back to where you got it from. And so a lot of us, we carry this unspoken trauma, or we may be unaware that we're reacting. But so I was wondering, kind of segueing a little bit here. So was it these experiences that led you into martial arts? Was it a form of like a coping mechanism, an escape, or what what brought you into martial arts?
It was kind of an accident, really. So I was always interested in China, like the Shaolin monks, this type of thing. I remember asking my mum one day to buy me green tea bags with jasmine in, because that's what the monks drunk at the time, apparently. Um, so it's just quite an unusual thing for a child to be asking their parents to buy, I suppose. But the the story of getting into martial arts was, there was a club that opened up in that local area, and they were giving out flyers, and we went there. But I was more interested in enlightenment and what that even was. So there was there wasn't a place you could go to learn about it, and it was David Carradine in the Kung Fu TV show back in the day. It was that type of Eastern philosophy should come hand in hand with the martial arts. So it was kind of Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and the physical side with learning to control the body that interested me. And then later on, like much later on, I stumbled across Ido Portal, who guided me on exactly what I was actually trying to achieve, because it seemed like he was doing a very similar thing at a much more advanced level. But yeah, it's interesting.
How do you, so kind of with the physicality and the controlling your body, but also, yeah, you mentioned the enlightenment factor, that a lot of controlling your mind. How has the martial arts journey influenced your trauma journey? I know it like wouldn't have been a straight path. Like, what were some of your biggest turning points in that journey?
So feeling safe was a big part of it. And as much as you'd like to say, well, after becoming 7 times world kickboxing champion, you would feel physically safe because of your ability to defend yourself, the safety didn't come from that. The
Mm,
safety came from the relationships I built along the way with my mentors and my coaches, and the team of people that I had around me, that made me feel like it didn't matter how far I fell, they would catch me. And that was one of the big turning points. That's where the physical body started to progress, because of the feeling of safety, which is also false, but
mm,
it's a nice feeling to have sometimes.
hmm. There also has to, are you familiar with the term like window of tolerance?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you like there must be some huge benefits to doing martial arts and not having that safe environment and expanding your window of tolerance. Could you maybe talk about how you view window of tolerance, how you view your window of tolerance, and maybe how that's changed over time?
It would be more for me the resilience. So
Mm,
I don't mind if I'm too hot, and I don't mind if I'm too cold. I don't
hmm
mind if I'm tired. Like if I've got to run 5 miles to make weight for something, but I'm tired, I'm still going to run it. I'm just going to do it slower and not beat myself up. So I think I think what you mean by the window of tolerance, with my understanding of it, is allostatic load. So it's the amount of stress we can take on at any one point
hmm
before the limbic friction puts us into our sympathetic nervous system and we become triggered. So physical pain wouldn't trigger me into a limbic response. I could still think very rationally and have
hmm
all my small amount of intellect available whilst under physical pain. And that came through the stretching process. So anybody that's become flexible that wasn't like some people are naturally flexible, so they haven't been through the same process.
hmm
But if you've been through the stretching process done in martial arts the correct way, you've learned how to regulate your nervous system under pain or during pain. And then you've got obviously regulation of the breath. Can you keep your breathing calm and slow your heart rate down under a stressful situation or in a stressful environment? So all of these things would come under the window of tolerance. And that's what we're talking about expanding our comfort zone and building resilience to being outside our comfort zone. So these things can grow, but it's where we start with it. It's if you tell somebody who is suffering from anxiety and who has got obsessive compulsive disorder that they've got to go out and dig in the dirt with their hands and they're frightened of germs, you're going to drive that. It's abusive. You're going to drive that person away. But maybe encouraging them to hold a small amount of dirt for a certain amount of time and then wash their hands is the right amount of exposure, maybe. But yeah, that's I don't know if that answered your question with the
Yeah, that did. I find it interesting. I like too that where you went with first was the stretching, because in a way through that stretching you're what you're doing is you're stretching your limits and you're moving moment, inch by inch, moment by moment in that. And but like also just really needing to be there and to feel it and to experience it. And so you mentioned the pain that comes
Yeah,
with the stretching. Yeah. I have a slight detour, like my own window of tolerance. I think almost exactly a year ago, I was helping raise a baby monkey,
yeah,
and he would bite and scratch at my nose and my ears. And when he was first doing that, like my brain would freak out. Like my brain would go to a place of like, this is not safe. And after a few times, what I realized is like he was just playing. He was just having a good time. And so I did, it's a little bit of what you describe a little bit, is doing that, identifying what's going on and then kind of talking to yourself about it. What I realized is like my brain freaked out, and it was like too much, too much, it's like a 10 out of a 10.
yeah,
But when I was outside of it and thinking about it, I was like, it's really like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. And I can handle a 2 or a 3 out of 10. And so it was something that over time with like this little monkey. So I didn't do stretching, but
yeah.
this monkey helped me expand my own window of tolerance, especially with pain. Um, so you mentioned with that, like that for you, like physical pain doesn't bring you into your limbic brain at all. And that's something I don't think that would be true for somebody who's not in martial arts. Like how long did that take you to get to a place where that physical pain wasn't something that would drive you into your limbic brain?
So when I say physical pain, I don't mean like I'm about to eat a hot coal and be able to stay
Hmm.
in Zen kind of thing. What I
Hmm.
mean is, in an instant, I'm not going to hurt myself like accidentally and then go into a panic situation, or I'm not going to react in a negative fashion with anger when I've hurt myself. Like when people
Hmm.
stub their toe and then they kick the dog, that type of thing. So it, it's past that, but it doesn't mean you're not subject to illnesses and long pain. Like if you've got an ache and it's there for a certain amount of day, even if it's not a big ache or it's a bruise or you've had an accident, that can wear you down very quickly over a few days. So you can still become irritable because of physical pain,
Hmm.
but it means that I have the ability to lean into doing something which is going to be painful. It doesn't mean that that's beneficial. It doesn't mean it's good for you. It means having the ability provides a certain amount of freedom. So I would be less likely to seek instant gratification to avoid it than to actually go, okay, I've got to do something which is potentially could hurt, but I'm going to do it anyway. That obviously comes in quite handy when you're a professional fighter, but you don't want to be doing that And also, if you are going to be doing it, are you being paid adequately for the negative effect that's going to have on you later in life? So yeah, there's a few aspects to take into consideration there.
Hmm. Yeah. Have there, I didn't realize we'd go in this kind of this window of tolerance direction. Are there other lessons you've learned on your martial arts journey that would have given you either attitudes or behaviors or beliefs that now from a trauma informed perspective have helped you with trauma or along the trauma healing path?
Yeah, so the the approach that I used is on Tim's course on the lift program. I I tackled it and approached it with the same strategy I would use from anything now, which I learned from martial arts. So it's attention, focus, concentration, self discipline, and what that does. Well, so attention, focus, concentration, distraction, and self discipline. And if we understand that as a process, we can apply it to absolutely anything we do. And I believe it got me a certain set of results from the lift program, from Tim Fletcher's lift program, because of the information on Tim's course. But in terms of the martial arts, I think there's a lot of things in life which are therapeutic, but we can't get them mixed up with therapy. So just because somebody sits and talks to a friend, it might be therapeutic, but it's not the same as achieving homeostasis through therapy. And then it's we have to be discriminative between types of therapy, because there's a lot of therapists out there which are trying to rip people off. It's like you need a weekly session, one a week. And I always use the analogy, life is literally shoveling you, I'm going to swear, a shitload, so a shovel load of shit every week. And the therapist that you pay £80 or $80 to see once a week is basically taking a teaspoon and sifting out 1 teaspoon a week, and it's just not enough.
Mhm.
Like, if you actually wanted to deep dive and sort it out properly, so not only do you feel better, you think clearer, you can relax within your body, and you become happy within your environment again, then I think you need to do a substantial amount with somebody who has it organized and has a track record of recovery. And regardless of whether people think they're traumatized or not, what Tim's courses do is they give you a step by step guide on how to do it. Because there's so many influencers, there's so many self help books, there's so many therapists now that they
Mhm.
tell you what you need to do. They can help you find out what it is that you need to do by investigating, but then they don't give you the map that we talked about earlier. So they'll help you explore it, and then they'll go, well, that's it now, you've explored it. And it's like, okay, what I've just found out is that on my map that I've just explored, there's a cave that I don't know what lives there. There's a monster under the bridge, and there's a mine that needs to be excavated, but they don't tell you how or give you the tools. And what Tim's course did for me was it gave me a set of missing tools
Mm.
that I had to deal with the emotional state and the emotional turmoil that was spinning around somewhere within inside me. So the martial arts gave me physical and mental tools, and then those tools came in handy when it came to tackling the emotional side, which I I I, I would class Tim as a mentor for me
Mm.
now as well. But yeah,
Mhm.
I hope that was a good enough explanation for that.
Yeah, yeah. I like that analogy too. And I think one of the key things that you said, I mean, there are a couple of key things, is really getting the right tools and following that map and exploring it. But then also that one time a week, because when we live in this world of, shame or flashbacks or trauma and false beliefs, like one hour a week of new ideas isn't going to shift you. And so working 3 or 5 days a week, doing like work for yourself and on yourself outside of that is really needed to kind of counter all of the inner critic beliefs, or
Yeah.
to begin to recognize the flashbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
I'm glad to hear that it had that impact on you. And also that, like, kind of fitting this emotional piece. Is there anything specific maybe that you'd be willing to share or able to share about some of the things that you learned within that emotional world for yourself?
What happened for me was Tim's course gave me permission to articulate my emotions in a way that other people could understand.
Mm.
So that I had some complete gaps in the same way that Edo gave me the lesson on ethics that day, and then I had to sit down and go, hold on, I need to rethink this. And then that led me down a better path, a better direction, the nearest direction at the time, by following the breadcrumb that he'd left me. Tim's course did the same for the emotions.
Mm.
And it's quite interesting. So see those books there, that shelf of books is a shelf of Scientology books. And I know they've had is it Miskovich on?
Yeah, Jenna
Is it
Miscavige.
Jenna? That's it. So
Yeah.
recently, so I had some experience with Scientology years ago. I was never a Scientologist at all. I read the books because I found it quite interesting, and where I was always looking. This was many years back. I was looking at emotions and how it worked and triggers and different things, and there's a lot of information there. One of the things, the first stages of before I found Tim's course, it was basically understanding that there is an ability in the human body to be confused about emotions.
Mm.
Just because we have them doesn't mean we can identify them. And if we can't identify them accurately, they can be mislabeled. And I think the Scientologist department, they would say somebody is being misemotional. And that would be like, we can go on a whole another direction with the Scientology. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with any of their information. What I'm saying is, if we understand that we might need to question our emotions and why do they come up, then it opens up a doorway in the same way that Edo opened up a way of me thinking a little bit further about ethics. As soon as we think we know something, we shut the door. Whereas if we go, okay, well, we could be misemotional. So misemotional would be, I'm feeling something now, but it's not accurate for the circumstance I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody might say just something that you disagree with, and you erupt with anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, well, what is erupting with anger? And it's when you've been triggered and a fuel has been lit. So anger erupts. What's anger even for? And then obviously on Tim's course, we learn, okay, it's actually okay to be angry when injustice has happened and somebody's overstepped a boundary. Anger is for putting your foot down and saying, hold on, there's a boundary there. But in my family, we were told that was assertiveness. And there was all these different things about, oh, we need to be more assertive, or don't be rude to somebody. But if you looked at what was going on behind the scenes, I now see it. So we talked about this internal map. It's like your emotions travel somewhere. So I always try and see emotions like a liquid traveling through tubes, and they're meant to get somewhere. But the way I got brought up, all the tubes have been switched into the wrong places.
Mm-hmm.
So what I had to do is I had to go through and had to reroute them all into the correct places. So first you have to identify which tubes are which color and where's it meant to be going. But what happens when two of the tubes mix together? If we mix the green emotion with the red emotion, what comes out of it? And it was one day, I think you might have been on the course of the week when we covered shame. And I could not get my head around what shame was as an emotion. So I knew intellectually, I understood what it was in terms of a core belief about ourselves, that we're not good enough, or that we're not worth the time or the effort or the energy. And it's a set of core beliefs about ourselves that are detrimental to us, that we have about ourselves. So I was like, okay, but I don't feel that. So I sat there and I meditated. And when I say meditate, I don't mean meditate in the way that other people do, where you sit and ponder existence. I meditated on that emotion. When do I feel shame? How does it feel? And what happened was I went through some shitty things that I've done in my life, and I remembered it. I allowed it to come up, things that I shouldn't have done, that weren't very nice and did affect other people in a negative fashion. And then suddenly, along with it, I felt the shame. And then I was like, okay, well, whilst I'm feeling this shame, and I know what it feels like, this is where it links in misemotionally. When have I felt this emotion of being ashamed of my actions, but when I haven't done anything wrong? So when I was in the right and I became angry because of an injustice, and I still felt or ended up feeling ashamed for being angry, or ashamed for putting my foot down, or ashamed for having a boundary. And this emotional feeling of shame erupted. And I literally cried for 3 hours. I sat there and I didn't avoid it because of the martial arts practice. I don't mind feeling uncomfortable. So I sat. I sometimes my eyes open. Most of the time I tried to keep them shut and stay with it. And it was as if a fuel source had been lit or was being used, like a petrol tank, until it had gone. And because people said, I've had it quite a bit now, where people say, oh, but I'm going to start crying and I'm never going to stop. That's what it feels like. But once it's gone, it's gone. And it doesn't mean that shame can't be re-triggered, but it means the shame you feel for yourself, the internal belief that you aren't good enough, will disappear if you can go into the shame. And I've explained it to a few people how disgusting it felt. And so disgust, in that case, it was a transformative emotion. So it changed shame into pride. And I felt disgusted. I felt disgusted of the things I'd done. I felt disgusted in the way that I'd been treated. And then suddenly I realized I didn't deserve to be treated like that. And the things that I'd done that were detrimental to other people were my responsibility. So my actions in that were my responsibility. But there was a justification of those actions. I knew why I'd made those choices, and it was to do with instant gratification. I had to do certain things in my life to feel better because I'd had some horrible stuff happen to me. And it doesn't excuse what I did in terms of the negative behaviors. I'm not going to give you any examples. It will just make sense. But if you go around hurting people, it's your responsibility and you need to stop doing it, because it's inadvertently also hurting you. But why are you doing it? And if it's to do with instant gratification, and you can sit there and eventually build up enough tolerance and resilience and like a window for tolerance, then the shame was the answer for me. And once that had gone, not only did extra tension in my body disappear, but I was kind of like, okay, I now need to go out and live my life to see if there are triggers that will bring that feeling back up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been about 2 years, I think now, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, around about 2 years, I believe. And I've worked with Tim, and I've lived my life. I've got into relationships with people, very pleasant. I've been in awkward situations, and the feeling of that shame hasn't come back up. And for me, I've now been able to help other people feel the same, and that's thanks to Tim. And it I don't know if I'm even articulating it well enough,
I
but it's amazing.
Yeah, so for me, like I followed that, and I think it's like a beautiful story, and it sounds in a very fortunate way that martial arts training in the back to allow you to face the pain, because I don't know a lot of people who will be able to really sit with, be with, and then face a deep amount of shame for 3 hours. Um, and so I'm really glad to hear that you had that experience. And And it sounds too that there's a second layer of it too, where kind of going back to the explorer is that once you kind of faced it, to have this explorer exposure attitude towards it as well, to try to see it again and try to find it in these different areas. That's really powerful. And I really like the way you talk. There's a very kind of visual. Uh, I can't think of what the word is. Kinetic. There's a kinetic, visual kinetic energy to how you describe things that I can really resonate with. And so you transitioned into this at the end here, but so now a lot of the work that you do is helping people break through their mental barriers, and rather than just focusing on technique. So I think we've been covering a lot of it through this conversation. I'm sure a lot of the different things that you bring, but could you maybe walk us through how you help someone identify and remove their own limiting beliefs?
So one way I would describe it is finding your edges. So when
Mm.
you say finding the edges when you're in a box
Hmm.
is you're pressing against something, but that's very different from finding your edge or finding the edge if you're stood on the edge of a cliff. Because there's safety in a box, but you've got to push against the wall, so there's less freedom. Not enough freedom is damaging. And with any type of trauma, what normally happens with people is they box themselves in terms of their environment. They shrink their environment. They go to the same shop. They stay in the same room. They see the same friends and less and less until eventually they isolate completely. And that's the box. But then on the other flip side of that, too much freedom. Like you could never be as free as you would be if you jumped off a cliff. You're going to be soaring through the sky, but eventually you're going to hit the floor. So too much freedom is also damaging. And then that's where you've got, like, if you think of that physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially. So physically, are you limited in a box by being stuck somewhere? So people have a shoulder that doesn't move. It's stuck in a box. They have a neck that can't move properly. There's different compartments of our body where we end up saying, well, this is my bad knee and this is my good knee, or that's my bad shoulder. So there's a box we're in. And then it's okay, well, too much freedom. Like if I had a bad accident on my motorbike at high speed, my arm or leg's coming off, and it's too free, it should still be attached. So somewhere in between, and this is where Tim's course comes in with 12 human needs. So we all have a need to move, but there are some kids out there that need to move 10 times more than other kids. there are some kids out there that need to sit still. They actually enjoy sitting still, reading a book or drawing something. So it's physical expression. And how do we do it? Do we need to express ourselves in a box, or do we need to express ourselves freely? And where is the edges? And then you could do the same thing mentally. Some people only need to explore discussions on the weather, whereas other people need to explore intellectually deep philosophy about the human existence of consciousness and these type of things. Then if you then say, well, emotionally, most people nowadays, if you say, how are you, they say fine. But is it really meeting our need for freedom emotionally? Or are we too much in the box? And then it then goes through with your culture. Like in England, it's stiff upper lip. If anybody says, what's the matter? You say nothing and you just carry on. And it's got to the point in England now where you can't even drive down the road. I've got a car and a van sat outside my house, both with punctures because the roads are in a mess and the potholes have caused punctures on a regular basis. But in England, because we don't complain, we just carry on. I'll get it fixed. We won't complain to the council. And that's where it's got to. And then the same thing financially. Like if we're in a box financially and we don't even have enough money to live on, then we're isolated. We're stuck because now the amount of money you have dictates how free you are really in today's society. And I think across those four platforms, physical, mental, emotional, and financial, we need to find our edges. And the edge might be something that limits you, but the edge always could be something that sets you free as well. But then how much freedom do you need, or how much security in the box do you need? And that comes down to your 12 human needs that Tim talks about on his course.
There's like this kind of a tension between too close and too far.
Yeah.
And finding like the healthier place in the middle. Let me ask, you started talking with the physical and about movement. A lot of people with complex trauma will either have very quick go into a freeze response, and then many people also struggle with dissociation. And so maybe they may not be connected to their body, or they may be meandering off into fantasy or the future or somewhere else. And so, how do you work? How would you work with people on this, especially for people who are disconnected from their bodies?
So there's a couple of ways of doing it. You would want to set yourself a certain amount of time on a regular basis to start to finish off a process which you started as a child. So the body works on feedback. So you've seen a baby sitting in a chair, high chair, being fed. They get to a point where the baby wants to start to feed itself, and it will dig the spoon into the yogurt, and it will just put the yogurt on its head, and then it goes through a process where it goes, that's not my mouth, because it knows that the yogurt wants to go in its mouth because it's tasted it, so it has a desire or a need to eat. So then it does it again, and it gets a bit closer, and eventually the mind coordinates the body through motor neuron patterns, and then it knows where its mouth is. And we all do that. I don't remember the last time I stuck an ice cream on my head by accident. So we got to a certain point where we can feed ourselves. Then it was, okay, well, I'm going to start crawling, and then I'm going to start walking. But there's people in the world that can move precisely at an extraordinary level, and there's people that only just scratch the surface of, well, now I can eat and now I can walk, but they don't even run, or if they stumble at all, they fall over. And again, it's about exploring our relationship with our physical body. But people with trauma, normally what happens is when they start to move, the physical pain of moving, because they're so hard on themselves and they push themselves so much, they'll tend to go, okay, instead of doing it in baby steps, like I'm going to go here with the ice cream, then here, then here, that's the mistakes. And they want to get it right first time, so they beat themselves up, or they'll set themselves a goal of, okay, I'm going to run 10K every day for a whole week. Instead of go, today I'm just going to go for a walk. Or what about standing still and practicing moving our weight from one foot to the other foot? What about learning how to control our fingers in a fashion
Mm-hmm.
that works? So it's a physical connection within the brain to the nervous system to learn what our body does and then how it actually feels whilst it's happening. And there's a set of processes and a set of very simple steps that me and Tim were talking about actually on maybe a platform that can help people do this in a really simple fashion. And it's through games and playing, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think it needs to be explored.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, you really, going back to that exploration, there's a lot of this experiential piece to it. And I like that one of the very first things you said there about like the body works on feedback,
Yep.
and then you're taking just this like really gentle and patient approach with that feedback in an
Yep.
experiential world, allowing yourself to explore. Yeah.
And that what that does, it then poses this other problem of lots of people will tell you what you need to do, like we've just done. We've just literally said a very slow approach,
Hmm.
carefully, gently, in increments. But what do those gentle increments look like? How do you
Hmm.
explore it? And that's where it really takes somebody with a background that can coach you through it. But there's too many people out there telling us what we need to do without delivering the how. So I think it's really important to understand
Hmm.
how as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That having a valued mentor is so important. And I think too, even on the kind of on more of the flashback limbic side of things as well, it's so valuable to have somebody who's in their cortex. It's always nice to have one cortex that's fully online,
Yeah.
somebody who can be adult and grounded in the present, to witness and be with you as you're going into your limbic brain or into your flashback. Um, I want to shift with you a little bit here, and so I know you're involved. Uh, I don't know everything that you're in right now. You're training athletes, hosting podcasts. You're doing so much more. Could you talk about some of the different projects that you're doing right now, and what excites you
But no,
most
so
about?
yeah, so I'm actually having an app built at the moment, which is going to have some of those courses on there. So it will have a step-by-step guide on what to do and how to do it in terms of finishing off this journey that we started as a child about reconnecting with our body. I think the best way of explaining it would be most people are familiar with the Tibetan term reincarnation. So we leave our body and then we revisit a new body and start another life. But forget that bit for now. What about incarnating just in this one?
Mm,
So we started a process. Whether I was in another body before, I have no idea. But what I do know is that I'm currently in charge of this one, and the connection between the me that thinks to move my thumb and the thumb moving, I'm in charge of that,
hmm.
and that can be explored through incarnation, finishing off the process of us actually getting into our body. And what does it feel like to really be in there? That for me, that's something that's really beneficial, because the more present you are within the body, the
Hmm.
more in tune you are to the environment. And we're not a tree, so if we need to change environments, we can move. And I think like I said, it's not therapy, but it's very therapeutic sometimes, and it can really help you ground yourself and get back into the prefrontal cortex that we need to be in order to live a comfortable life. Yeah. So the app, I also write for a magazine which is called FMA magazine. That we're the next article about that is actually going to be to do with trauma and polyvagal theory and how to regulate the nervous system under stress as well. So that's a big project. But the main thing is trying to bring Tim's courses over to England, and we're building a gym from scratch, which is going to be, it's a community centre based, but so it's a full gym. We will deliver martial arts courses, but we'll also deliver Tim's lift program from that centre as well, which is going to be, it's going to be great, that one. So
that would be so valuable to be able to do, to get the physical, the mental, the emotional, all in one, all in one
yep.
location. Yeah. Um, let me ask, if you could, knowing, kind of going through everything that you've gone through, and knowing what you know today, if you could go back and talk to little Ed, to your younger self, uh, maybe that 8 or 9 year old version of you, what would you what would you say to him, or what would you encourage him to do?
So it would, the advice would just be brave enough not to listen to anybody else.
Mm,
Be brave enough to not listen to anybody else, because so all of my mentors that have had a big impact on anything I've done, the main reason what they did was so impactful was it reconfirmed the direction I was already traveling in. So
hmm
it was like, imagine a child when the child's been dropped off at the play park, and the child stumbles into the play park, and before they get 3 or 4 steps away from the parent, they turn around to look back at the parent, and the child does that to see the parent's facial expression, whether the parent is giving the child permission to go ahead.
hmm
And if the parent can convey permission, the child will go ahead. But when the parent is concerned and apprehensive and is in fear themselves, is my child going to get hurt, or are they going to come back safe?
hmm
Then the child will co-regulate off of the parent, and they're going to be anxious as well. And with me, all of the mentors that I've had that were very impactful, and you could change the word mentor for teacher, vice versa. What they did was they gave me permission. And because I trusted them and I trusted their judgment, I knew I was
hmm
going in the direction with that permission.
Yeah, I love that, because I love the way you worded it, and in a different way. It's like, trust your gut, trust your own intuition. And, we're such marvelous organisms. There's like so much in us that's just kind of like, it's built to live and to explore naturally.
Yeah.
That if we can trust our gut and follow our own gut, our own heart, our own intuition. Yeah, I think that's beautiful advice. Let me ask then too, so for any listeners who might be struggling with self-doubt, limiting beliefs, or even their own healing journey, what's a piece of advice that you'd leave with them?
So I'm a firm believer in 15 tries. So
Mm,
what I don't mean is get yourself in 15 bad relationships to work out that that's not the right relationship to be in. But set yourself a goal of trying to recognize something 15 times, because the prefrontal cortex, the executive function of the prefrontal cortex is pattern recognition. But we need to, in order to spot a pattern, especially when we're trying to convince our limbic system to change its wiring, the sympathetic nervous system, we're convincing it through evidence. And something that I've found with my coaching of fighters, but also I wouldn't call it, I don't like the term life coaching. I just prefer like mentoring. It's if you can get 15 pieces of evidence together, that's normally enough for you to start changing those beliefs. But you've really got to gather the evidence. So along with the explorer, there's the hat of the detective or the investigator. And so you have to think there's a part of me that's trying to trick me and keep me safe. It's there for a purpose, but it's not serving me anymore. These protectors, I suppose you could call them, are internal things that were coping mechanisms at one point, but they've become maladaptive. They're not good for me anymore. And if I can present myself with 15 pieces of evidence of when I did something well, or 15 pieces of evidence that I've noticed something 15 times. Like every time I wake up in the morning, I go for a coffee. And if I wanted to quit coffee, 15 times I need to write that down. Today I've had a coffee. By the time you get to 12 or 13 or 14, you start to think to yourself, I really should not do this today. Mm-hmm. But it might take that many times. Because there's only a very small window for us to make a decision to change an action.
Yeah. There's a lot of like specificity and clarity in in how I see you kind of treating yourself and in the advice that you give, and just for the kind of the reality testing that does, and see how powerful that would be, and being able to either build that impetus to change or to see what is really going on. Yeah. Let me ask before we wrap up here, is there anything that maybe that we didn't cover that you'd like to say, or anything, any
I
final
think
thoughts or words?
that it's worth mentioning. So once I'd finished doing the course, I jumped on the lift program, and I like to live from the ethos of I won't ask anybody to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. Otherwise, it's really hypocritical. So my mum has been suffering with mental health issues her entire life. She spent lots of money on counselling. She was given free counselling. She had I think it was an 83-degree curvature of her spine. So her spine was literally an S shape. She suffered massively through her parents and some horrible things they did during her life. But she's always tried. The thing that she was trying to do was she couldn't find the right fit, the right therapist that understood what she was talking about. And as soon as she understood what trauma was, and with the tools that Tim's course, the lift course, gave me, I was able to get her to go through the course. So my mum and one of my ex-girlfriends, who's an amazing lady, that they both went through the course together with a few students from my gym as well. The people, the change in those people and the people that they've become were the people that I could always see. What happened was the things that they thought were their ADHD or possibly their autism and the mislabeled parts of themselves that they were worried about, what would they be like if they dropped away, they dropped away. And now these people, they are the nicest, kindest people that you've ever met, the most understanding. They're building huge amounts of resilience. And after the course, my mum phoned me one day. She was walking down the road and she said, something's different and I don't know what it is, but I think I'm understanding. And she said, I walked past a person and they made eye contact. And normally she would just look directly at the floor.
Mm.
And she said that I walked past this person and I made eye contact. And it's the first time in my life that I've walked down the street and not felt ashamed of myself.
Mm.
And for me, like, if anybody understood the huge amount of hours and hours once a week she spent counseling, we're talking grief therapy, gestalt therapy, psychotherapy, all these different types of therapies, and it never worked. And I told her as she was doing them, they're not working. They won't work for you because it's not addressing the actual cause of the issue. And once she did Tim's course, the shame's gone. Obviously, there's triggers can still come up, but now she's equipped with the tools to deal with them.
Yeah.
But to have my mum smiling and laughing and joking and not feeling ashamed was a godsend. Then what happened was over Christmas this year, my mum gets really upset during Christmas times because my sister's birthday was the 14th of December. And my sister passed away about 13, 14 years ago now. She died of cancer, unfortunately, my younger sister. My mum would get close to Christmas. She would always get upset. She would then panic over Christmas and have panic attacks and need to get kind of Valium from the doctors and different things. This Christmas, she made it through Christmas and actually had a nice Christmas. And that's the first Christmas in a very, very long time that she's been able to do that. And I honestly, there's not many people that I would say could change the world if people listen to them. One of those people is Tim, and the yourselves and the people that have put these courses together and are really trying to push it out there. If people actually listen and are willing to go through the process, it will literally make the world a better place. So I'd like to say thanks to Tim from the bottom of my heart, because it's made a massive change for my family.
It's beautiful, not just for them and their own healing, but in kind of just seeing your community grow in their own healing and resilience. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ed. I think this has been a really powerful conversation. There's so much. I really appreciate your action bias, your movement bias, and then also the embodiment and really just that attitude of exploration and moving into that attitude of exploration. I think there's so much, so many wonderful things that you've shared with us today. And for those listening, if Ed's insights resonated with you, be sure to check out his work and follow his journey online as well. And so that's it for today's conversation. Until next time, take care. And Ed, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's great.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care, and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.